Hi everyone, it's William with the Grand Duke Dmitri Diary Series. We're doing his 1921 diaries, and in the last video we had a fairly eventful one for the 13th March, where Dmitri turns to Coco Chanel for solace at a difficult moment in his life. Today we're going to be doing two diary entries for the 14th and 15th of March. Our friend is still in a little bit of a daze, so I want to mention that in advance, lest you think that there's a mistake in translation. For instance, when he writes, "From the Ritz, I went to the Ritz," but you know, he was clearly a little distracted when he wrote his diary entry for that day. Anyway, a recap of the 13th, There were two big events. One was a soiree that Ducky gave, Grand Duchess Victoria, at the Hotel Loti, and it was kind of a big show for Dmitri, for her to try and convince him that she was already the empress in exile and she had her little court, and he saw right through that, and I'm sure just found it kind of pathetic and sordid. He was already in a bad mood anyway, and he went then to Coco. He'd been trying to find Coco. He'd been in and out of the Ritz, and finally that evening he did find her. After the whole thing at Ducky's, he went back to the Ritz. He found her. He tells us he was really in a horrible, depressed state of mind. He was planning to abandon Paris and go back to London, which was really kind of his comfort zone. But Coco talked him out of it. She told him, well, if you go to the Riviera, I'll go with you. And he tells us he was very tempted by that. And of course, he will end up giving way to that temptation. Okay, so that's the recap. Our cast of characters this time, I will say in advance, there are three people whom I can't identify. One is called Old Linder, and the other Vasilchikov, with no Christian name and patronymic. I really, truly have no idea who Old Linder was. The Vasilchikovs were quite a prominent aristocratic family in Russia before the revolution, and they were, in the government, in the Senate, in the military, and without a Christian name, I just don't know which Vasilchikov this was, but Dmitri would have known them, at least in passing. Helene, or Hélène, or Helene, however you want to say it, she's a woman who, again, I just have no point of reference for. So you'll see why. Anyway, yeah, let's dig in. Here's the 14th of March, 1921. It's a Monday, and we're in Paris. I have to admit, I don't remember what I did that morning or where I had lunch. Probably at the Ritz Grill with Coco, who took a drive with me in the Bois in the afternoon. The weather was heavenly and very warm. I dined that evening with Audrey Parr, and then went to the Ritz, where Old Linder was giving a dinner. Maria and Gulia were there, along with Olya Kreutz, the Duchess of Camastra, and some unfamiliar gigolos. It was incredibly boring. From the Ritz, I went to the Ritz to see Coco, where I stayed until 2 o'clock a.m. All right, that's it for the 14th. 15th of March, 1921, Tuesday, I lunched with Maria, wrote in the afternoon, and then went to Coco's, and we went together to Versailles for tea. The weather was ideal, and it was frightfully warm. I dined that evening at the Polovtsovs, Sasha and Sofka's. Vasilchikov was there. We went to the Bat, and then I went to the Travelers, where I ran into Bob Luders, who had a sour mug because he hadn't heard any news from Hélène for quite a long while. I went to bed early. So there we go, the final two diary entries before we dive into the long one of the 31st. Not much going on. When Dmitri is down, he tends not to provide a lot of detail. You know, he might, under other circumstances, have talked a little bit about this soiree that old Linder was giving, or talked about Coco a little more, and not forgotten whether he had lunch with her or not. But when he's depressed, this is just the way the diary entries are. Okay, so Audrey Parr, I can tell you, is on her way out. She is not going to succeed if she has in mind to be Dmitri's lady friend in Paris. I don't know if she had that in mind, but she seemed to have made a real point of leaving Copenhagen, where she lived with her husband, as you recall, and going to Paris at the same time that Dmitri left. She didn't go to Berlin, but she got on the same train with him, if you recall, and they both were, you know, she knew he was en route to Paris, and yeah, so he's been seeing her since he's been back, but that is about to draw to a close. I do not know not knowing who this old Linder was, I should say, I don't know what brought this particular group of people together. Dmitri clearly already knew him, or he wouldn't have called him old Linder. He would have said something more about him. Yeah, kind of an odd party. Dmitri, Maria, and Gulya, their stepsister, Olya Kreutz, the Duchess of Camastra, who actually was, this was a Sicilian. Her husband was a Sicilian duke with the surname Lanza. I believe that's correct. And she was a middle-aged woman, around 50 years old. And yeah, I just don't know what the point of connection was. Olya Kreutz, or Olga Erikovna Kreutz, was the eldest daughter of Princess Palais. So she was very close in age to Dmitri and Maria. She was born in 1888, so I think she was about a year older than than Maria. Yeah, 1 or 2 or 3 years older than Dmitri, and she seems of Princess Palais's children from her first marriage, Olya seems to be the one that Dmitri and Maria got along with the best. The younger one, Marianne, who became Derfeldin, I believe, Dmitri sort of hung out with her a bit during the war in Petrograd. But Olya Kreutz is the one who is there throughout his diaries, right up until he stops writing his diaries at the end of 1940. Olya is someone that he kept in touch with, and that Maria and he obviously liked. Okay, so what is this about gigolos? Well, I am not translating that word. That's Dmitri's own word. It exists in Russia. It's not sort of in the modern North American conception as the male equivalent of a sex worker, a male prostitute, although, there was often a sexual component to being a gigolo. But, a well-turned-out young man who could fit in at cocktail parties and, with people of culture and refinement, and who was often a companion, a male companion, whether there was sex involved or not, to an older woman, a widow or what have you, and would escort her to the opera and things like that. So Dmitri uses the plural. Some unfamiliar gigolos. We know he's in a bad mood, so maybe he's being unkind calling them that, but that's the impression he gets, that there are men there who are maybe sort of buzzing around the Duchess of Camastra or something like that. And it wasn't a shocking word at that time. I don't know if it is now or not, but, if you watch the old Fred Astaire movie, for instance, The Gay Divorcee, there's a man identified as a gigolo. It's quite a comic role, and he's just there to create a public scandal so that this woman who's hired him to do so so that her husband will be will have to give her a divorce because of this public scandal. So, that's all he's there for. Anyway, getting off that subject, yeah, Dmitri's in a bad mood. He finds the whole thing boring. He doesn't want to make small talk with gigolos or whatever. Okay, so he makes a beeline when he's finished with these social obligations. He goes to Coco's and stays until 2 a.m. All right, the next day, the 15th of March, the Tuesday, starts out with Maria, let's see, then Coco, out in Versailles, and then the dinner that evening is with Sasha and Sofka Polovtsov, not Pete and Mimi. So the older brother and this very sort of distinguished person and serious person, a banker, a money man. He'd been kind enough to, trying to remember, it was in January, and Dmitri talked about it, whether he himself gave Dmitri a big loan or whether he arranged a big loan for Dmitri so that Dmitri could pay his gambling debts. Anyway, that was Sasha. Vasilchikov was there. I don't know who he was. And then they all go off together to this Moscow-style Russian review that Dmitri's already seen 3 or 4 times but loves, called The Bat. What next? Well, when he's kind of moping about and doesn't have anything to do, he goes to the Travelers Club and runs into Bob Luder's this buddy who's the right kind of guy to go out carousing with, but apparently they don't do that. Bob is also in a bad mood because of this mystery woman. Yeah, that's about it. I didn't really need to go over that because it's all pretty self-explanatory. But, so what's happening next time? Well, so, as I said, we're jumping forward 2 weeks to the 31st. And we will find out that Dmitri, it's practically an elopement. On the 19th, he and Coco, trying to keep the whole thing as hush-hush as possible, trying to disguise it from everyone, I think even Maria, they go off to the south of France together in a car. It's a road trip, and they stop at an inn along the way, and that will be fun to do those diary entries. But that's not immediate because we have to bridge the gap between the 15th and the 19th, and Dmitri is going to start off the long diary of the 31st by telling us some more information about what's happening in Russia, specifically about Kronstadt and the failure of the Kronstadt rebellion. But, skip that if you like, but I think it's quite interesting. It's not just, Dmitri providing facts and figures about Kronstadt that you could get on Wikipedia. It's him talking about the impact on him and on the emigration in general and on Russia and, how it affects his hopes for the future and that sort of thing. So, yeah, you'll want to come back for that. You'll want to come back for him talking again about how, in the long entry, about how what really prompted him to go from simply being down in the dumps to having this true existential crisis and running off with Coco. So all good stuff, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.